Happy Monday, y'all. So I have quite the episode in store today. I've been doing some thinking recently, and it feels like as women, we have put a lot of effort into things like having rights. And over the last couple of years, we've kind of just tossed our hands up in the air and said to hell with it and given those rights over to men in dresses. So we're going to discuss that. We've discussed it before, but we're going to go a little bit more in depth today because it's just becoming more and more obvious that predatory men are invading women's spaces under the guise of being trans. And nobody is really willing to discuss this because there is a lot of backlash that comes along with having these kinds of conversations. But lucky for everyone, I don't care. So with that, my name is Noelle. This is Just Say No. Let's get into it. Now, before we dive into this too deep, I want to make a distinction because I feel like there is a difference between people like Blair White and people like Leah Thomas. And on that fact, I would hope that we can agree. Now, that being said, I will be referring to Blair White and people of that kind as she, her. And I will be referring to Leah Thomas and people of that kind as he, him, because my stance on pronouns is very simple. If you are willing to acknowledge biological truth, then I'm not an asshole. I'm willing to use your pronouns. However, if you're going to sit here as a whole man and tell me that you are, in fact, a woman and everything that encompasses, you can fuck off. You can fuck off. So with that out of the way, let's dive more into this distinction that I'm talking about. So when you look at Blair White, or I think another really good example of this is if you were on YouTube back in the day, there was a makeup guru named she went by Nikki Tutorials. And the thing about people like Blair and Nikki is that they are trans, but they would prefer to fly under the radar with that. They want to be perceived as women in society, and they have done quite a bit to accomplish that goal. They are trans, but being trans isn't who they are, if that makes sense. And just to emphasize that point, I remember for the longest time, nobody online even knew that Nikki was trans. The only reason that she came out was because supposedly somebody was blackmailing her to do that. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it still speaks to my point that this wasn't information that she was living and dying by. She wanted to be perceived as a woman online for all intents and purposes. Being trans wasn't a weapon that she used. And then you look at people like Leah Thomas, who has made no effort to present like a woman, because I'm sorry, but growing long hair isn't hiding the whole man that is underneath. He has actively chosen to put himself in positions that are going to instigate chaos. And to demonstrate this point, you just need to look at the way that he soared through the ranks when he switched from competing against men to competing against women. When he competed in the 200 freestyle against the men, he placed 554th. When he swam that same race against women, he placed 5th. Now, there are going to be people who say, yeah, but he didn't place first, so obviously there's not an advantage. And you would be correct. I mean, he did not place first in this particular race. I would assume that somebody who places 554th against people of like build and skill isn't that good at the sport to begin with. But he did move up 549 slots. So that's a testament to something. I don't know. Insert word. Fill in the blank, whatever you want to call it, but it says something. It's not saying nothing. She's not quiet. And frankly, over the last 5-6 years, this has gotten much worse. Back in 2019, Laurel Hubbard, the male weightlifter who competed against women, took home 2 gold medals and a silver medal in the Pacific Games. Now, Hubbard had transitioned in 2012 at the age of 34. So obviously his body had gone through the male puberty. You can't really deny that fact when you look at his 6'1" stature and 280-pound build. And since he had already gone through male puberty, one of the big changes that happens through puberty is males start producing more testosterone. And testosterone, among other things, contributes to bone density and muscle mass. And these two things play a large factor when it comes to weightlifting and a lot of other sports for that matter, but we're on weightlifting right now, so stick with me. So now if we flash forward to the Tokyo Olympics that took place in 2020, Hubbard ended up failing to place after he failed to lift 275 pounds, which is a little odd because in the Pacific Games where he won 2 gold medals, he lifted that same exact weight, and this was the year before, with no problem, and then proceeded to jerk 315 pounds. So I don't lean towards being conspiratorial, but if you asked me, I would say maybe he threw the game after he received as much backlash as he did for stealing 2 gold medals and a silver medal from women. Unconfirmed. Can't confirm, but that would be my opinion. Just in case 2 stories were not enough to satisfy you. Around the same time, around 2019, 2020, a college student named Jonathan Easton started competing against women in races a year after he had transitioned. According to thedesert.com, it says, quote, he not only won the women's mile race in the indoor conference championships, but she beat her nearest rival by a whopping 4.5 seconds. That's a lot of time for a race. Now, they continue on and say, this came 21 months after Eastwood placed 7th in the men's 1,500 meter run and 22 months after running a personal best time of 3 minutes and 50 seconds, which is just 0.12 seconds off of the woman's world record. So his personal best is a fraction of a second longer than the woman's world record. So that's fun. That's really fun. The women's world record for running a mile is currently 4 minutes and 9 seconds. And there have been around 20 high school aged boys who have beaten that. In fact, they haven't just beaten that. All of their times are under 4 minutes. So they have all beaten that by a magnitude of nearly 10 seconds. Let me repeat that. I don't know if you are understanding what I'm saying. Nearly 20 high school aged boys have beaten the women's world record. This is the fastest woman that we know. The fastest woman on planet Earth. This is her. Her world record has been beaten by 20 high school aged boys by a magnitude of 10 seconds. 10 whole Mississippis. And here's another fun fact.
Fun fact, actually really, really sad fact.
2017, the U.S. women's soccer team played just a for fun game against a under 15 soccer team, which for clarification means that every person on that soccer team, every boy on that soccer team was under 15 years old, and they lost 5-2. Have they stopped being fun yet? So we all know Venus and Serena, who are 2 of the best female tennis players to have ever played the game. These are 2 women who have committed their lives to this sport. They have trained vigorously. They are very, very good at what they do. Unfortunately, in 1998, they placed a bet that they could beat a male player who was ranked around 200th in the sport. Now, again, I would like to clarify. So Venus and Serena, the best tennis players, each played a match against a guy who is ranked 200th in the sport. And they both lost. He beat both of them quickly. And I want to be clear, this is not to rag on women. This is not at all to rag on women. This is to illustrate the point that men have a biological advantage over women. This is why we created women's sports to begin with. Okay? All right, let's continue on. So, here is something that is interesting. On average, men have 23 nanomoles of testosterone per liter, whereas women have on average 2.6. Let's just take a moment. We're going to be taking a lot of moments throughout this podcast because I think that people are just going to need that time to really allow for this information to penetrate their souls. I think that there's some people who really need to hear what I'm saying, digest it, sit with it, think about it. Because I know it's painful for some people to hear that there are differences between men and women, but there are, and I'm going to continue to illustrate that. Let's acknowledge that gigantic baseline difference. That baseline difference is massive. That's huge. As we already discussed, testosterone contributes to a lot, but particularly it contributes to bone density and muscle mass. So knowing that the natural baseline, men have 7 times as much testosterone as women, the natural conclusion is that they have stronger bone density and larger muscle mass. Which, if you just look at an average man and an average woman, you would say, yeah, sure do. They sure do, buddy. Now you might be thinking, Noelle, what are all these numbers? Why are we talking about this? Well, in 2019, the International Olympic Committee made the ballsy decision, no pun intended, that a man transitioning to a woman has to be at 10 nanomoles per liter in order to qualify, which is still 3 times the amount which naturally occurs in women. So that's still like a big discrepancy. I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but that's quite a bit. It's quite a bit. The point here is that when we have these discussions, you often hear people on the left saying, well, there are qualifications. You can't just transition to be a woman and then start competing. There are qualifications. Okay, these are the qualifications. These are those qualifications. 3 times the amount what a woman naturally produces is the qualification for the Olympics. Honestly, here is the thing. Even if there was some governing board of some sports committee, again, sporting sportster over here, even if that board decided that it had to be, that transitioning men to women had to be at that 2 to 3 range to match women, that still wouldn't be good enough because these men will have already gone through male puberty. The advantageous changes to their body has already happened. You can't undo that. You aren't going to rewind your wingspan. You aren't going to undo your bone density. You're not gonna change any of these things just by taking estrogen. And before anyone says anything, no, this is not argument for childhood transitioning. That is still sick. It is still sick to do that. All I'm saying is that allowing men to compete in female sports is whack. It is whack. That is just sports. This is something that has infiltrated a lot of areas of life. For example, prisons. Now, if you are listening to this and you consider yourself to be more left-wing, I have a question to pose to you. Let's say that there's a man who sexually assaulted and raped women, and then he got sentenced to life in prison. But then somewhere between all of the assaulting and the raping and the sentencing, this man decides that he's going to identify as a woman, and then he gets sentenced to a women's facility. Can we not agree that this is a predatory man who is using or taking advantage of the obvious power plays that come along with identifying as trans? Or are all trans women women? Because it cannot be both. It cannot be both. This is a man who says he's a woman. So either all trans women are women, or sometimes people lie. And just so we are all aware, this actually is a true story. This is something that happened. This is actually the case of a man named Stephen Wood who transitioned into Karen White after he stabbed his neighbor. And it turns out that this isn't a one-off. In 2022, a male who was placed into the female facility at Rikers after he claimed to be a woman got himself an additional 7 years on his sentence after he raped a woman in the facility. So ladylike. So ladylike of him. But if that's not enough for you, don't worry. I have more. According to a prior inmate at the Washington Correction Center for Women in Seattle, multiple women there have been assaulted by men who get placed into that facility after they claim to be women. Go figure, it's in Seattle that this has happened multiple times. And it's unfortunate because if you express concern for these women, you are a TERF. We're going to take a pause again. Let that one sit. Sit with that one, please. You are a TERF for expressing concern over these women who are being victimized. Do you think maybe there's something wrong with your ideology? Do you think this zero-sum game, there might be something wrong with it? Throwing it out there. Chew on it. Stew on it. Think about it. I know you didn't think we were done. We're not. So back in February, a person by the name of Scarlett Blake was sentenced to life in prison after committing murder. And this came after they posted a video online of them putting a cat in a blender. And just as a side note, what does it say about our society and how desensitized we are that I have no problem discussing murder, but the idea of a cat being put in a blender just like really does something to me. That does something to my soul. Like bad. That's so bad. But back to Thingy Boo Scarlett. So most news outlets were reporting this as a woman who committed a crazy crime, except this was a man. This was a whole man. This was a whole ass entire man. And the reason that this story actually got brought to light was because J.K. Rowling tweeted it out with the hashtag not our crimes. And this spurred a big conversation. And I think that this is an important conversation to have. So I want to read you guys this thread on X by Richard Garside. He is the director of the Center for Crime and Justice Studies, and he demonstrates the massive difference between male and female murder rates and why mislabeling these offenders, what matters. So he says, classifying just one male convicted of murder as female, the total annual female murder convictions goes up by around 5%. So one person makes a 5% difference. I hope you guys understand how massive that is. And then he continues on and says, by classifying 5 males convicted of murder as female, the total annual murder convictions go up by around 25%. That's huge. That's huge. Okay, so then he continues on by stating, classifying male defendants convicted of murder as female is terrible for the integrity of social statistics. It is also terrible for public understanding of murder and who commits murder. This deceit by public bodies and news organizations needs to be sorted out and quickly. To kind of bottom line this, statistics matter to help us understand who is committing crimes, and by looking at who and these types of demographics, it can help us start to hopefully work backwards and understand why. Criminology has been a huge part of my studies in college, and statistics are really important for understanding why crime happens and trying to come up with ways and theories as to how to prevent crime from happening. Like, these things matter. When we start getting into this kind of stuff, you start hearing people say, like, well, why do you care? And ultimately that brings us to the slippery slope. And I feel like a lot of people hear the word slippery slope and they automatically flash back to 2014 and the gay marriage argument and conservatives screaming about the slippery slope with that. And while I'm not going to say there's no merit to that argument, what I am saying is I want to delve into it a little bit more, narrow it down, and specify exactly what that means. Because I feel like this specific side of the argument isn't delved into very much, and I feel like conservatives have a tendency to say things like, well, that's just the way it is. Men are men and women are women because that's just the way it is. Men cannot be women because that's just the way it is. And I personally have never been the type to accept or resonate well with vague answers like that. I need to know the why. Why is that the way that it is? Why does it matter? Ultimately, why does it matter? The idea that I would like to explore today is basic limiting principles. The slope only becomes slippery when we do away with limiting principles, which is precisely what we have done. Because, for example, sex is a basic limiting principle. Now bear with me because this does get a little bit philosophical, but at its core, I believe it is quite simple. So, definitionally, a limiting principle is a general principle that limits our explanations, which normally goes unquestioned or even unnoticed in our everyday or scientific thinking. So what does that mean? Essentially, it means that there are parameters that we operate within as we try to explore and understand our world that keep things in order. And I think that a key word from this definition is unquestioned, because I know that we are generally taught to question everything, and yes, we should, but I also think that there are already things that are well studied and well understood, and questioning those things only ensures inevitable chaos. For example, the sky is blue. I do not need to question this. I do not need to think about this. There are going to be those who are highly philosophical who are going to say, but is your blue my blue? And then we start getting into the your truth and my truth, and that's where things get chaotic. Do you see how things become very chaotic after that? When we take away these limiting principles, which are often based on irrefutable facts, things turn to chaos quickly. And that is when the slope becomes slippery. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Are you tracking? Are you following me here? Let's continue. Okay, so bringing us back to what is the point and why does it matter? Point here is that sex, male, female, men and women, is a limiting principle that we have completely done away with. These words no longer hold any meaning, and therefore they could mean anything. And by doing away with this, by allowing this to be done away with, society as a whole has intentionally or unintentionally essentially said, okay, question it all. Because what I'm seeing here is over the last 5 years, 6, 7 years, it's gone from I feel like I am a woman in a man's body and that's my journey, to I am a man in a woman's body and you must affirm me, to I am actually a cat in a human's body and now I need a litter box in this stall or else I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, just to clarify, because I know that there's a couple hard asses out there. But the point stands. The point stands. But getting back to a serious point, by questioning sex, we have thrown biology up for grabs, to be questioned, to be assumed false until proven otherwise. And if sex can be questioned, why can't age be questioned? And if age can be questioned, why can't a 55-year-old man identify as a 7-year-old? And if he can do that, then why can't he associate with other 7-year-olds? Why would that be a problem? Because he feels like he's 7 inside. Now bear with me because I know that sounds crazy. I know it sounds crazy. But I would like to point out that it was only 5 years ago that Dennis Prager dang near got laughed off of the stage when he was on Bill Maher for stating that people believe that men can menstruate. Flash forward to today, you're a bigot for saying that men can't menstruate. Do you see my point? Honestly, it is my firm belief that we are already seeing a movement towards, what would you call, trans-aging? It's not funny. It's not funny, but it kind of is. When I see movements like people calling for pedophiles to be referred to as MAPS, which stands for minor attracted persons, sick, I see stuff like that and I'm like, you're trying to normalize pedophilia. And maybe I have my guard up after the last 7 years of all of this crap, but I'm seeing where this road is leading. I see where this road is headed. And now granted, it is a small fringe group of people who are calling for pedophiles to be called MAPS. However, I think it's also a small fringe group of people who believe that men can menstruate, and look how much power they've garnered. Now, for the sake of having a fair argument, because I always try to present things in good faith, the people who are advocating for MAPS are doing so in the name of destigmatizing the conversation and allowing for people who are pedophiles to come forward and say, hey, I'm having these kinds of feelings, and with the ultimate goal of less victims, which is obviously a noble cause. Anything that results in less children being harmed is a noble cause. However, I just don't know that I'm convinced that that is what it will accomplish. Sometimes things are stigmatized for a reason. And I think that we need to be incredibly intentional and careful with how we choose to proceed at the end of the day. Because ultimately, we have found ourselves as a society so open-minded that our brains have fallen out. And it's indicative of a deeply sick society. To tie this all back together, everything I just said is why it matters, but it matters because it's indicative of a sick society, and sick societies do not survive. And given the fact that the people who hold these beliefs are generally very anti-America, that might be the goal. That might be the goal. But I would prefer if our society survived. I really would. But with that, that is all that I have for you guys today. So I hope that you enjoyed the episode. Wherever you are watching, please do the thing that you are supposed to do to help me out. If you are on YouTube, subscribe, like the video. If you have a couple seconds on your hands, leave a comment. And if you are on Spotify, leave me a rating and follow me over there. All of my social medias are in the down bar as always. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will talk next Monday. Bye.